famous quote from Oscar Wilde is that imitation is the serious form of flattery that mediocrity can play to greatness. The Asian Coalition Against Counterfeiting and Piracy, which is comprised of some of the world's leading brand names in the areas of fashion, pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, and fast-moving consumer goods, among others, takes a slightly different view, however. Counterfeit goods indeed are inferior to the real thing, and yet their purpose is hardly to flatter the originals. Andy Bradshaw is ACACAP's president, and he's here today to share with us some of his experiences and observations on IP protection in the global marketplace. Good afternoon, Andy. Thanks for joining us.
How are you, Frank? Good to see you.
Let me start with a question from 30,000 feet. What's the attraction to counterfeited goods and pirated content? Why is it a problem, and why can't it be stopped?
Well, I've been involved in this industry. I was just trying to count back for about at least 25 years now, Frank. I mean, I left school and college, higher education, and got into this industry by chance, really. And nothing has changed in those 25 years. Perhaps the delivery in terms of online has changed slightly, but at the crux of the problem is cheap goods manufactured in Asia and delivered to the West. And it's simple as that. It's cheaper product, and people will always seek a bargain, I guess.
Let's stick with you for a minute. Could you tell us a little bit more about your personal background? How'd you come to get involved in this line of work?
Yeah, so when I left higher education, I got involved in law enforcement back in the UK. So we have a organization that called Trading Standards that is basically focused on consumer law and protections. So, you know, part of that was consumer safety, weights and measures thing, and also counterfeiting. So trademark offences. In the UK, that's enforced by Trading Standards. So I since the beginning of my career, I've been enforcing trademark legislation. So I did a number of years in that, and then I joined the police service in London, which obviously gave me valuable experience and skills over a period of time in dealing with very sensitive cases and certainly more complicated issues. But it gave me those investigative skills, which is what I'll probably come on to later in the conversation. I left the police and I joined a wonderful company based in London called Pentland Brands. So I was in-house then, practicing protecting their rights. A little sojourn into the hospitality industry, and then I came back and I worked for Superdry and developed their first strategy. And we had some really good fun there, taking out some fairly big targets in the early days. And then, of course, I find myself at the Asian Coalition Against Counterfeiting and Piracy, as it was called in the beginning, now called ACACAP. It's just a bit easier to say.
Yeah, indeed. For those who might be unfamiliar with ACACAP, could you please give us a little bit of background about the organization? What is it exactly, and how did it come about?
Yeah, so it's about, I think it was 2014. A good friend of ours, Bharat Dubey, who was a former head of legal at Richmond and owned a company called Strategic IP Information. He got together with a bunch of famous brands, and they discussed the need to create something that was an organization that was pan-Asian in terms of, I think everybody knows that the biggest issue in the world around counterfeiting is Asia, China, and probably more recently rapidly growing trends in India. So they came up with this idea of this Asian Coalition Against Counterfeiting and Piracy based down in Singapore, and it was going to be a platform initially for rights holders to discuss best practice and to take collective action. Over time, we kind of moved it a little bit more towards an investigatory service. So whilst doing all of those good things in terms of lobbying, reactive strategies, we really focused on proactive strategies, going into Asia and taking out what we call high value targets. So that's really what we're talking about. And to do that, I mean, it's incredibly important that we not only had this organization, but that we work with the right people in Asia, Frank. And, you know, I'm talking about some of the best law firms and investigators across the whole region.
Yeah, I mean, we know that nowadays the counterfeited goods, fake scarves, fake bags, you know, it's no longer restricted to the back alleys of, say, Bangkok or Kuala Lumpur. You can easily find them online, Taobao, Alibaba, Amazon, even maybe. But obviously, the stuff has to come from somewhere. So, how do you guys coordinate with the online investigators to find that link between the online retailing and the brick and mortar supply and investigation and the manufacturer?
So, you know, for us, it's actually a really useful tool. You know, the online service providers that have sprung up in the last 10, 15 years provide an invaluable source of intelligence for us. Whereas we have investigators in the field looking for this intelligence. All of a sudden, we have this online platform now where there are significant amounts of intelligence that can be drawn out of the system. And it's been made easy for us with these companies such as CIPI, Incopro, or Core Search as they are now, who can develop this intelligence in a way for us and communicate it to us via it's simple spreadsheets or mapping. So linking all of these or joining the dots, as we call them. And even if it's not the full package, because it rarely is, because a counterfeiter doesn't give you the real address, there's normally something within that package that we can interrogate and lead us back into at least getting a foot inside the counterfeiter's network, and then tracking upstream to the big high value target at the end of it, which may be the manufacturer or the man who produces, who gives the money to the manufacturer for him to produce the goods.
You mentioned before that you have an extensive network of localized teams, team members. Could you talk a little bit about, you know, working with some of them and how far up the chain of manufacture and supply they're able to go in some instances?
So we work with law firms and investigation firms, and some of the best in the industry. So, you know, I hope they don't mind me dropping their names. We work with Anand and Sai Krishna Associates, the Legist in India, Cho and Partners in Korea. We work with Ginny Wong down in, I'm name dropping here a little bit, in Malaysia, Pakarenko, Ukraine, Schmidt and Orlov in China. So we have some great law firms that we work with, but law firms on their own aren't enough. We need that localized experience of investigators who live and work in those areas. And over a period of time, we've identified the best. We carry out our due diligence. We make sure we're working with honest guys who believe and follow our ethical approach to anti-counterfeiting. And the idea is that behind it all is what we're trying to do is create financial disincentives. So you can, with online, you do a lot of takedowns and things like that, and the problem keeps coming, but you need to do that. You certainly need to keep that on a low profile as much as possible. But with the actual boots on the ground stuff, I think it's vitally important that you get inside the network. And the only way you're going to get inside that network is by having face-to-face meetings with these people, building confidence, and then getting into their warehouses, sales platforms, and most importantly, the factories. And that's where we create the real financial disincentive. When we raid a factory, we not just seize the goods. So that's number one financial disincentive. But the other one is you're taking out manufacturing machinery, and that costs money to replace. You arrest a guy, you perhaps put him in prison, and then you sue him through civil proceedings as well. So in my opinion, and I'm happy to be shot down by anybody on this, but the only way that you make a difference in this industry is by actually going after people's money, counterfeiters' money. You take the money out of their pocket and you make it very expensive for them to do what they would like to do. They can't earn money when they're in prison, or they can, but you're disrupting the network. But more importantly, if you're taking money out of their bank account and significant sums, all of a sudden it's not worth the aggravation. They move on to something else. And we've been very successful at that.
It sounds very sensitive and very alluring. Are there any particular, you know, without naming names, are there any case studies or war stories that you can tell us about generally where you You know,
I
you've
can
had
talk.
that.
I can talk about one that is very fresh in my mind because it happened a few weeks ago. Again, I can't name any names because it's still subject to legal proceedings. But we we received a certain amount of intelligence from our members regarding customs importations, and the addresses. A lot of the addresses were Hong Kong, which is generally shell companies, and there's not a lot of real intelligence to be gained from that. But what we found out over a period of time of carrying out this investigation is we started to see a lot of overlapping information, telephone numbers, some email addresses, and through a couple of the email addresses, we were able to just about get our toe in the door. So once we were in there, we over a period of time, we carried out purchases. We started to meet people within this network, and very quickly we realized this network was absolutely vast, based down in the southern part of China. So in the end, after 6 months of surveillance work, good footwork on the ground, lots of meetings, we identified some pretty big targets, and I'm happy to say we were well supported by the Chinese government. They supplied us with 50 police officers, and we hit, I think it was 5 addresses, something like that, 14 arrests, tens of thousands of pieces of product seized, hugely successful case. And of course, we hope we're going to get a conviction at the end of this, or convictions, and then we'll go after the full financial disincentive package by suing them as well. So that was one of the cases. Okay, it took a long time, a lot of resources, but it worked, and we hope that we've absolutely disabled this whole network right now. We hope that it's going to be one of our, one of the stories I can talk about for years to come because it's so big. So there you go, hot off the press almost.
Congratulations. You mentioned China, and it was a segue into hotspots of activity, if you will, or places where you're seeing a lot of the problem occur. You had mentioned Asia as being the source of a lot of the counterfeited goods around the world. But then you just told a very compelling story about the support that you got from the Chinese authorities. What's it like to operate in China for those who don't?
Never had a problem personally. I know that around the global pandemic, resources have been severely stretched in China, and priority has been given to personal safety equipment, PPI and all this type of stuff, but PPE, sorry. But I've never actually had an issue. The time delay is a little bit longer at the moment in getting good work done. China's good, India's good. Yeah, so in the source countries, as long as you're prepared to work hand in hand with them, they'll support you. They'll go the whole 9 yards without any question. But you've got to have that relationship.
Yeah, and do your clients like to see it all the way through to the enforcement of the courts as well?
Absolutely, yeah. Clients are very supportive, but it's because of the success we've had, because we're in it for the whole, from start to finish, and it's a trust that's built up over time, and yeah, very supportive.
Well, that's encouraging. Let's just talk for a second about the other end of the spectrum. It sounds like therefore India and China are to some degree rewarding jurisdictions to work in. They've got the resources to devote to it. Are there any jurisdictions or places that are more difficult or cumbersome that you come across where you feel you often can't make headway?
Absolutely, there are countries in Southeast Asia where it's either prohibitively expensive to do this type of work, or the suggestion of corruption is frightening. And of course, as you know, under the Bribery Act and FCPA, a lot of brands just won't work there. I won't work there either. I'm not going to put myself, my business, or indeed my clients at risk by working in some of those environments. I'd like to not probably mention which countries they are, but I think probably a lot of your members will know where they are when I say Southeast Asia. So some places are just too difficult at the moment, and and we're working with these governments, to change things. We're talking about anti-corruption programs. Every training exercise we give, we tack on a little piece about anti-corruption, and some of these countries at the top end at government level are very supportive, but that doesn't necessarily filter down to the lower paid police or enforcement officers.
Yeah, the guys who don't get paid very much and need to put food on the table for their families.
Exactly.
It sounds like these relationships that you maintain are what distinguishes ACACAP from some of the more traditional membership organizations. And in fact, the coordination with the law enforcement authorities that you had mentioned, that sounds like very beneficial to rights owners and something that they can get out of joining on.
Yeah, I think what's really important for enforcement is to have a skill set whereby they recognize, the brands that they are supposed to be looking for. A lot of brands maybe feel that, that their brand is well known, but when you get to some parts of Asia where perhaps that brand isn't perhaps seen as much, then those enforcement officers really need to understand and know that brand to get a feel that they've been supported by those brands. So what ACACAP does is we carry out training exercises at what we call value locations. So two good examples would be, there's a lot of production of clothing down in Guangdong province and up in Ludhiana in India. So we would try to train customs and enforcement officers in those areas. We're also looking at areas where goods are shipped from. In China, we're up in Ningbo and also down in Guangzhou, but we're looking at the biggest ports and training their officers in those locations. So it's a very strategic approach to how we do trainings, because we could offer thousands of trainings every year, but what is the value purpose of that? I think the point is that you have to be strategic. You're working with brands who have a budget, and therefore you need to be able to work to that budget. So we believe that producing higher quality trainings are more valuable to our clients.
See. And just wrapping up, it seems as though from what we've discussed that maybe by the time members join or need ACACAP, they might already have a problem, and that their goods might already have been counterfeited and gotten out there in the marketplace. Before or beyond joining ACACAP, what are some of the strategies and steps that rights owners and brands can adopt early on to protect their IP? And what are some of those related costs?
Well, the very basic foundation of all of this is to make sure you have your trademarks registered, I guess. Without that, we're unable to take any action. So make sure you get that in place. And I would certainly say, before even coming to us, that you probably need a strategy in place of your own. Well, ACACAP will work with any brand to develop the strategy or to improve the strategy. But having your own basic strategy in place and a budget to do the work is very, very important. And of course, having good lawyers, good investigators, without whom you can't do a thing. You need to be able to trust these guys implicitly. And that's what ACACAP does. We do that hard work, that due diligence. We form that whole, what do you call this, microcosm of information gathering around the partners that you want, that we think you should be working with or could work with. And then we put that on a plate in front of brands and we say, hey, this is a trusted proposal. We believe that working with these guys, you're going to get a return on investment and you're not going to be impacted by any risk whatsoever.
Wow, it sounds very beneficial. The relationships that you guys have built over time are so essential to getting things done in Asia, to getting effective. Fascinating stuff. I think people are glad that you exist. That's about it from us.
Yeah, look, it's a problem that isn't going away anytime soon. What we're trying to do is just give people a package that they can believe in, an environment that they can carry out brand protection activities safely, and that's the key. And we're open to working with any brand in any industry, and we would invite anybody, including law firms, because our clients are also law firms, to come and speak to us.
How can people in the audience find out more about ACACAP? Is there a website reference that you can give us?
acacap.org is the first thing. Or you can just contact me directly, andrew.bradshaw@acacap.org.
Sounds good. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us today. Really been informative and we've learned a lot.
Good to see you again, Frank. Take care.
Thank you.